On the Donbas front line, the ongoing battle between Ukrainian forces and Russian invaders has once again highlighted the vital role of combat drones in modern warfare. A drone unit from the 36th Marine Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces successfully crippled an enemy logistics convoy attempting to deliver supplies to frontline positions using all-terrain vehicles, ATVs. A group of Russian infantrymen attempted to move quickly using ATVs as a means of delivering supplies. The enemy chose these light vehicles because they could navigate the narrow paths and rugged terrain of the Donbas and were considered more difficult to detect than large logistics trucks. In documented footage of the operation, these advantages pale in comparison to the precision and mobility of Ukrainian combat drones. The 36th Marine Drone Unit quickly identified enemy movement in the open, launched a precision strike, and within seconds, the explosion struck the small convoy. The ATVs, which the Russians were using to transport ammunition and supplies, were destroyed, along with the infantry escorting them. Footage showing the flames and destruction at the point of conflict highlights the imminent threat of any enemy attempt to secure supplies on the front lines. This attack is not just a logistical devastation, but also a significant blow to the morale of Russian troops. Losing vital supply lines in the Donbas sector will weaken the resilience of enemy infantry, already under heavy pressure from unmanned aerial attacks. Drones are not only a means of attack, but also a surveillance instrument, constantly shadowing the invaders' movements, making their every move fraught with risk. Military analysts believe that Russia's use of ATVs indicates the increasing difficulty of maintaining supply chains with large vehicles. Despite adapting to new strategies, the enemy remains within the range of Ukrainian electronic surveillance and precision munitions. For the 36th Marine Brigade, this success adds to a long list of effective operations that continue to weaken the invaders' fighting power in the Donbas. This success once again demonstrates that drones are now a dominant factor in modern warfare, where light mobility, real-time reconnaissance, and precision strikes make enemy logistics nearly impossible to defend. While from the Pokrovsk direction, Ukrainian forces are closing the gap around the remaining Russian forces in their Dobropilya salient. As Ukrainians finish off pockets of Russian resistance, the Russians' only hope is to surrender to the advancing Ukrainian army or be annihilated completely. After conducting a successful penetration from the high ground in the west, Ukrainians are now launching their attacks from the north as well, completing the pincer around the Russian Dobropilya salient. Ukrainians are using highly trained infantry squads to move in, engaging with Russian forces along the way. The main advantage of the Ukrainians here is their far superior ground lines of communication, enjoying a direct supply line from Kramatorsk and Ruzhivka, functioning as central operating hubs for Ukrainian forces in northern Donetsk. Additionally, if we take a look at the topographic map, we can see that as the Ukrainian supply lines approach the front, they cross through several settlements in the valley between two hills. This blocks signals for Russian drones, who mainly rely on FPV-type kamikaze drones, instead of munitions dropped from drones. Russian fiber optics also still only makes up approximately 20% of FPVs used by the Russians, so the valley Ukrainians move through is largely protected against most Russian strikes. The buildings in the settlements and tree lines running along them offer additional concealment factors to Ukrainian infantry units passing through. The last major Ukrainian advantage is their extensive utilization of heavy drones like the Heavy Vampire and Baba Yaga variants. Because these drones drop heavy explosives or a series of smaller mortar rounds from a height, they are able to fly and hover above the valley, unaffected by the weaker signal strength that Russians suffer from lower to the ground. Geolocated footage shows how Ukrainian infantry squads move south through the settlements under the watchful eye and in constant communication with Mavic reconnaissance drones that detect any Russian presence. The Ukrainian squad initially engaged the position with grenade launchers, using high explosive rounds. However, the rounds were not penetrating into the basement, where some of the Russians were hiding. So, to save manpower, ammunition, and time, a Vampire hexacopter drone was called in. The drone then dropped 4 mortar rounds directly on the basement, wiping out the structure and scoring several direct hits into the underground structure itself. Russian infantry attempting to flank Ukrainian attacks from the high ground to the east are also promptly intercepted by Ukrainian FPV drones patrolling the area, as signal strengths are much less disrupted on the high ground and the slopes that the Russians must move across first. In this manner, Ukrainians are systematically moving south, having already consolidated full control of Volodymyrivka and expanding the gray zone to fully encompass the Russian salient. As you remember from a previous report, Ukrainians avoided finishing off the 2 Russian encirclements further north to lure more Russian forces in to attempt to rescue them, while keeping them away from important positions. However, with the trap now sprung, there is little reason to keep these pockets alive, and the final clearing operations have begun. Ukrainian soldiers on the ground report that the western pocket has been cleared completely, as their attention is now moving to the one to the east. Every Russian is first offered surrender and to be taken as a prisoner of war. However, if they hold out and refuse, they are promptly dispatched, as Ukrainian forces are much needed elsewhere and maintaining a tight perimeter costs a lot of resources. Overall, Ukrainians are closing the gates and finishing off any Russian soldiers who remain, as Ukrainian soldiers on the ground are already reporting that the prisoner of war exchange fund is rapidly being replenished. In the gray zone, Russian units moving through are now eliminated by drones, as Ukrainian infantry is making their way forward, leaving the fields covered in Russian bodies. The Russian Dobropilya breakthrough event is coming to a close, as many Russian generals will soon start shifting the blame to one another, as a hammer of consequences is sure to soon come from the